Johnson, and this is focused on Liberia. Hit it! From Cape Mount to Cape Palmas, Mountain back to Atlantic Ocean, Obomi Hills to Boakai, to educate, elevate, and promote. Yeah, focus on Liberia. For Liberia, Liberia. For Liberia, yeah, 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 yeah. From Monday to Sunday. From Monday to Sunday. It's focus on Liberia. Talk about home affairs. Hey. In diaspora. Current affairs. Hey. Reliable information. History. Ooh. Talking about culture. Yeah. Politics. Education. Entertainment. Yeah. Business. Sports. Advertisement. Articulation. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. From Monday to Sunday. Focus on
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Jack.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another session of Focus on Liberia. I am your co-host, Gabriel Carter. It's a pleasure to be in the studio with you today. We have a very, very interesting discussion to have with you. As we usually say, just pull up a chair, share, and welcome your questions, perspective, and participate. So, with that being said, Jimmy, welcome. I think we have a very interesting topic today.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, we have new economic forecasts, given that we just witnessed an historic elections in Liberia, where we seeing the incumbent graciously losing to his rival by a razor-thin margin, and elegantly calling and conceding in a gracious message. So Liberia is taking leadership in democracy, what it should look like when the incumbent, can in Africa, when an incumbent can graciously, concede. I think that sets the bar of how democracy should properly operate. So
Go ahead.
But with that come a lot of changes. With that comes new personnel. Maybe a whole new plan, most likely. And a new expectations. So we got a lot to talk about now.
No, thank you. And I think that is a very good, uh, opening. Yeah, and I think this is something that we all can be proud of. I think you alluded to that. The bar that we have set for democracy in Liberia, like you rightly pointed out, usually the incumbent has you know, the ability to subvert, democracy to, regulation or even push the vote, the election process further down the line while he's trying to finagle, what way to come on top. But I think what President Weah did in terms of conceding, yeah, I didn't think the votes were even done count. They didn't even finish counting the vote when he conceded, and that is a bar that I think something we all can be proud of in terms of uh, if we continue in that process of, you know, building the little tenets of democracy, it will put us back to where we once were in terms of really becoming uh, the model for democracy in Africa. And I really do applaud him, despite, you know, my disagreement with his policy and how he ran the country. But I think what he did in terms of conceding, keeping the peace, calling his supporters to remain calm, that this is a transition, that this is a government for all Liberia. I think that was very, very remarkable on his end. So kudos to him on that. But like you said, with that comes a new dawn, a new phase, a new direction, a new perspective, hope in terms of the mandate that the Liberian people have now given to Mr. Boycott to, hey, this previous administration wasn't doing what we expected. Now we think have those capabilities to deliver uh, the country for not just your partisan, the UP uh, partisan, but also the entire country as a whole. Now, I will say this: yes, that was a mandate. He won the election, I think by not a few margin of error, a few margin of votes. So one thing that is truth that we can take away from this election is that it is a divided country, split right on the middle, and you can tell by the votes. So he didn't win by a huge margin. That tells you there's a half of the country that thought, this country should have remained under Weah, and there's another, more than half that, you know, gave him the mandate which he needed to win the election. So there's a divided country, that I think he needs to really take into account in terms of how he implement his policies, who he put in key positions, and all of that. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So uh, as if you haven't seen, the topic we have today is, a Boakai economy. What are his key expectations to jolt the economy? Meaning that, we're not in a good place. So what is he going to prioritize to, breed, use, to use the medical term, use defibrillators to, resuscitate the economy, so, you know, the wheel can start spinning on that again. So that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about today. There's a lot of discussion points, and as we said, take a chair, grab a glass, grab a coffee, or whatever you drink. Come, let's participate and have a good discussion. Thank you, Jimmy. Over to you.
Yeah, I agree. And let's get ready to roll it. Kick the ball around the road. What's our first topic?
Yeah. Okay. So I think our first topic here today is we want to talk about, I think, key appointments. So meaning that, given that this is a new, government that is taking over, and, you know, I I'm sure most of you guys, I don't know if you read the Unity Party platform. It is filled with a lot of hopes, a lot of ideas. Now, whether those ideas were really flushed out in terms of being articulated properly in the House, that wasn't done. But we want to talk about the key appointments, meaning individual ministers and that he's going to put in key position to really carry out some of those ideas that were outlined in his economic policies, that his platform, as you guys usually call it, that were put out there. So, and I think this is going to be key if he really wants to make a dent in that process in the elections. What are your perspective on that? What do you think he, um, given what you've seen with the economy so far, what do you think are, you know, some areas or ministers or ministries that he should prioritize putting key people in to really, you know, kick the ball rolling here?
Okay, I think there are two ways of looking at this. First of all, the plan.
Hmm.
What are we doing to, what is it going to do to formulate the plan to, bring economic prosperity to Liberia and Liberians?
Hmm.
And that plan is, I think, is very important. Now, some may wait till they may fill the positions, like the key positions will be the Minister of Finance,
Hmm.
because they're responsible for the fiscal policies in the country,
Hmm.
and they're also responsible for planning as well.
Hmm.
You know, so because we combine the Ministry of Planning and with finance, so that's a huge responsibility there.
Right.
Um, Also the governor of the bank. Now, I don't know, our constitution, it may be a position where you have a tenure. You're
Right.
supposed to have a certain tenure. I'm not sure if that has been maintained over the years, but the governor of the bank will be very key because they're responsible for the monetary policies.
You mean the
And
central bank governor, right?
the central bank, yes. And if I were to, for all our audience,
Hmm.
fiscal policies will be determined. What kind of laws and what kind of things you will place, budgetary things you will put in place,
Yep.
so that you can bring the benefits to the people. And monetary policy, well, how much money will you put in circulation? What will be the residual money you require from banks? All those. That's the will be the monetary policies.
Yep.
And also very going to be very important is I would say, the Ministry of Commerce,
Hmm.
simply because commerce is what you want to grow,
Yep.
and definitely you want them to be. We have a bureau of investment.
Right.
I remember when they last turned over, I went to the investment commission,
Hmm.
and the deputies and whatnot that were still there leaving, they were complaining that, there's they were replacing all of them.
Hmm.
So and they were like, look, government is continuity.
Right.
Why would you replace everybody
Uh-huh.
and bring a whole new set, and they don't know what we're doing? At least you hold on to somebody so they can properly hand it over, and because they were already engaged in it, but just replacing everybody. And I was surprised. I was privy to that conversation.
Hmm.
Um, and So I'm not sure if this is going to happen again. I don't
But
know.
what's your thought on that? Do you think this should it is a they should remain in terms of I agree with you that once you come in and clear out everybody who existed in there, that's what we call institutional knowledge that existed within
Mhm.
those institutions. If you come in and get rid of those individual, that's what is it, 6 years, or some people who may have been there for that long, 6 years of institutional knowledge that new folks coming in would have been, be able to benefit from that just went out the window just because you are now thinking on policy or partisan line, right? That hey, if this person doesn't belong to the Unity Party, they shouldn't be here. Like, what do you think about that wiping out of institutional knowledge, in terms of instead of keeping them in and bringing in bringing in more other, capable individual to really, supplement or complement um, their, their knowledge.
Oh, I definitely believe, I understand why, there's a political element of this.
Right.
And I would understand why you want the head of the institution to have a certain loyalty to the plans and objectives of the new administration.
Hmm.
So if you don't think that they are politically aligned with you, I can understand you wanting to replace them.
Hmm.
But um, when the rank and file, the technicians, the career personnel, you don't necessarily have to replace those.
Yeah.
But those ones, where you want your vision to be carried out, and that's at the top.
Right.
And during the transfer, right?
Hmm.
I think it should be done in a careful way so that you do not lose some good negotiations you've already started.
Yeah. That's
Now,
brilliant. That's a brilliant
yeah,
point. Yeah.
yeah. So I would say you assess what is there,
Yeah.
make an assessment before you start doing the replacements.
Right. Yeah.
Make an assessment first.
Okay. All right. That's brilliant. And I agree with you. I think there's probably, I agree with everything you said, but I think for me there's three key areas that I think, which I think you talked about as well. I think in terms of appointment, that I think will, given that if you put not just appoint individual there, but if you put in the right people, will have a, you know uh, maybe immediate or short term or long term impact in terms of really flushing out your ideas and carrying out your economic plan that you want to. And as I think you mentioned, the Ministry of Finance, the central bank governor, and the National Investment uh, Commission, and also the Ministry of Commerce, the Minister of Commerce, the Ministry of Commerce, right? But for me, I think if there were two that I would have to pick, I would say the Minister of Finance, one, and also the central bank governor, because I think for the exact same reason that you mentioned as well. From the fiscal side, in terms of, do we increase taxes in certain area? Do we negotiate certain concessions that existed before? Now, the reason why I talk about concession here now, mind you, this administration that is now to be taken over, they were the one who signed those previous concessions that were deemed bogus. So they have the opportunity here to renegotiate. If they have savvy negotiator deal makers, right? That's one. So if they appoint the right person, those people were able to maybe renegotiate the royalties, or instead of giving somebody a concession for 25 years, you can bring it down to 5 years term. So every 5 year they have the option to renew that term, given if they can meet certain clauses, certain milestones that were actually put in place to benefit Liberia. That way you can actually have something that is measurable, right? So they have that ability to do that on the fiscal side. You can look at property taxes. One of the things that actually is an eyesore every time you go to Liberia are the dormant properties in prime real estate location that are just sitting there. Nobody's doing anything to them, right? How do you revive that? Do you start putting tax lien on them to have people mix to you know kind of have people develop those property? And do you increase taxes? Um, so from the fiscal side, I think I agree that the Minister of Finance is key as well, but more importantly, so also on the central bank side as well, right? The central bank governor has the, and I could be biased too because I'm from the financial world, but I think he is, in terms of having power, he is neck to neck with the president in terms of if he knows what he's doing to transform that country, to effect change in that country. And the reason why I say that is because I argue with one of my partisan people who is an ANC member as well, in terms of saying that the the capitalization, the recapitalization of bank, that needs to be happening in our country. And he said, "Oh, the banks are recapitalizing our country," and we had a huge argument. I was giving him reasons why. The central bank governor has that ability to do that, to recapitalize the banks, make access to finance and credit tangible, something that is accessible to Liberia, instead of what is being measured on the MCC scorecard, right? He can actually, you know, create intermediaries, strengthen the financial intermediaries to be very robust in terms of meeting the credit and business need for businesses and consumer in our country. This is why I believe those are the two most important uh, appointments he can actually make. But there are other things, including I think you mentioned that as well, the National Investment Commission. Given where we are, I think if he put in the right person, they can really help him bring in investment into that country and actually, you know, inspiring Liberian to go back to go and invest again. So I think those, in terms of key appointments, those would be the one that I actually focus on in terms of um, uh, to have some kind of immediate or short-term impact in that process. Yeah. Any other
But
ideas on that?
yeah, I'd like to add one more to that list.
Yeah.
And I would like to add the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And
Mm,
the reason why I'm at because, as you know, the the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is responsible for foreign policy,
yeah.
how you engage and deal with other nations.
Yeah.
And we're talking about spurring economic prosperity in the country.
Right.
That, of course, we're being a nation of the world, one of the world nations, we need cooperation with these
Right.
countries. So
Yep.
your policy that you carve out, that you promote,
Uh-huh.
has to be about promoting economic cooperation.
Right.
And so that means that the foreign minister has to be on board with the plan so
Yeah.
that he knows how to go after these relationships that
Hmm.
will enhance and bring economic benefits to the country.
Yeah.
So, foreign policy, as many may not think or may not realize, is essential to developing better economic growth
Hmm.
and enhancement in the
Yeah.
country. It could be a major contributor, and even more than the finance minister, because that you're negotiating
Hmm.
agreements and arrangements that could bring all kinds of benefit to the country. So the foreign ministry, or whoever will be chosen as a foreign minister, will
Hmm.
definitely have to be part of that trio to guide the country toward the economic prosperity.
Perfect. Perfect. I like it. Great. All right. So I think I, I agree with you on all of them. I really do. So eh, now is I think what we keep saying here, the appointment is not the thing, but finding the experienced individual, uh, those who have practiced some kind of level of knowledge of practical ideas of those very ministries. Uh, because I think something we mentioned as well, what's going to happen is going to be a clean house. Like you just come in, bring the broom and sweep all the ministry out. And what's going to happen, as I said, one of the things I think that not just Liberia fall victim to, but in the Western world we fall victim to as well. Like, you know, we kind of wipe out institutional knowledge. And I think that is very key. Like you said, that's key in terms of there were some negotiation on the table. You imagine you're in the middle of a negotiating a deal, your term is over, a deal that you could have see through and finish and negotiate, even if that was going to take the next 6 months, a year, instead of me keeping you there to say, hey, once you're done with this, to make sure that you're done with that before we have to part ways. We just come
Mhm.
in and just sweep you out. Now somebody else new might just come over and take over that negotiation from scratch, no idea, inside knowledge of the processes, the stages that you may have had, the strategy of negotiation that you may have had a hand that gave you the advantages in negotiating that deal. They just wipe you out. That is key institutional knowledge that just left, right? And I think it will put that ministry at a disadvantage, and subsequently so put Liberian at a disadvantage. So I absolutely agree with you on that. The next thing I want us to look at is I think it kind of a segue into what the first topic. It's what are the key areas to jolt the economy if we really want to make an impact, right? That not just the immediate term, but the short term and long term. Holistically, what areas, be it agriculture, be it should he focus on, or should they focus on the private sector? Should they what areas do you think they need to pay attention to, or what do you think they need to do to really, because, and the reason why I think I want us to talk about that is because, believe it or not, as much as I think George Weah did the right thing, the economy we have, it is in the abyss, and there are several reasons why. So that is the reason why I want us to look at that in terms of how do we revive it? What area?
Well, given the character, the individual, given that Ambassador Boakai, what he has always touted was roads. So we already know that if we can guess, given this was his mantra, we can guess that road infrastructure,
right,
will be key. You know what I mean? Will be very, very high on the list. And also we expect, being he's an agriculturalist, agriculture to be. I mean, we've heard him mention agriculture, and if we're talking about being self-sufficient, definitely agriculture is going to be a focus, right? So those two things are almost givens that they will focus on, they will be top on the list. But you and I both know that to achieve that, you have to go in steps, right?
Right.
In other words, there has to be a systematic approach to it, and there are other things you may have to do prior to going all out in agriculture and going all out in agriculture and infrastructure.
Right.
So one would think, and for me, my plan. Hey, Larry just joined us. Larry, glad to see you. Glad you could make it.
Yes, sir. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Loud and clear. We do hear you. What I was just about, Gabriel had just asked me the question. What would be what would be incorporated in the economic development plan of this new administration?
Yeah.
And I was just telling him that Ambassador Barker has always touted infrastructure, roads. So we kind of know that would maybe be a key issue. And also, being an agriculturalist and we want to be self-sufficient, that would probably be the other important issue. But to attain these things, it requires a systematic approach. You have to put certain things in order so that you can get that. So I was just about to say what will be else will be incorporated in this new plan is maybe, first of all, building unity. Let's start with unity. We talk about there's some healing that needs to do. You need to bring the country together so we work for one purpose. So There will be some unity you will want to work on, getting everybody on board to buy into your new policy and plan. The other one will be to build capacity. People can't do it. You can have all the infrastructure out there, but if the people are not capable of using it, the people are not developed to appreciate and use these things, you will still have a problem. So capacity is another thing you want to do, and then maybe look for ways of modulating the law so that the law itself gives rise to economic prosperity. We're talking about taxes. We're talking about duties. We're talking about companies who, in our case, we have a company controlling all the goods and services, or rather just the goods that come into the port. Does that need to be revisited? So those are the kind of things I think that will go into that plan, while you contemplate building roads and making developing the agriculture.
Perfect. Larry, thank you again for joining us. I'm glad you're able to make it. So I'm not sure if you were on. We were talking about a Boakai administration, and I think the first question we asked was, what key appointments in terms of ministers that he's going to put in position that's going to help him accomplish his economic agenda, or his platform, as we Liberian people like to call it. And the second question here is, what are the key areas that we think are needed to jolt the economy? So you can take it piece by piece. If you want, you can answer this one first and go back to the second one. You can answer the first one first and then come to this one. But again, welcome and thank you for joining.
So, that's two great questions. I was listening to you guys earlier. So here's the thing: when someone comes into power like this, historically, the first thing you're going to have, there's going to be a whole bunch of infighting. You're going to have people jockeying for position. Everybody wants to be minister. I totally don't understand why, some people who are totally unqualified wants to be ministers, but that's how it is in Africa, right? Not just Africa, but Latin America. Everybody want to be king, right? Nobody wants to be, everybody want to be the chief. Nobody want to be Indian. Exactly, Indian, right? Exactly. So they're going to do a whole lot of jockeying. So he will have to take that leadership role, put that whole thing to bed. It's like the whole concept of forming a team, the whole norming concept. You're going to have that. But if we even look back, what happened with President Weah, they spent so much time celebrating, they forgot they had a country to run.
Yeah.
You got to pay attention to that. But I don't think Boakai's going to fall for that. The reason being, he's seen this movie before. He was there for 12 years. So he knows what needs to be done right away. So I'm sure he probably not hit the ground running. But you have a whole lot of factions. People would be so interested in seeing how they can position themselves very close to the president. And then you're going to have them now start bad-mouthing other people to position themselves close to the president. So you're going to have that whole nonsense going on. Now, what is it that he needs to do? Historically, so let's take a look at the three tigers, for example, like in Asia, right? You have Singapore, you had Hong Kong, you had Taiwan. Those countries they were worse economically than Liberia at one time. They were definitely worse than Liberia economically. But somehow they managed to change themselves. So what did they do different that they managed to change themselves? Which would have to be what Boakai would have to do. And I think Darling mentioned one of the items I was about to mention, the rule of law.
Yeah.
No country has developed without people adhering, people paying attention, people respecting the rule of law. You find me a country where even the United Kingdom was a place where people were doing a whole lot of the pirates way back when. They fled and went to the United Kingdom to go hide out. There was no real rule of law in the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
You're not going to fix anything in Liberia if you don't establish the rule of law, if you don't really, really put a good justice minister in place, because we know the justice minister who is there right now was afraid of his shadow. The guy wouldn't do anything. There was just a whole lot of shenanigans going on. He wouldn't speak up, no meaningful press conference. He wouldn't do anything.
Yeah.
Got to strengthen the rule of law. You can't have judges taking bribes openly, taking money that have been set aside for on court cases, using it for their own benefit. And look, and Supreme Court is telling them what you're doing is wrong, but nothing happens. You've got to fix the rule of law. The second thing I mentioned, and this is where the current finance minister and some of his colleagues disagree with me, and I think you guys would probably be on board with me on that. I haven't seen a country that has developed without a strong financial sector. It hasn't happened anywhere. America was struggling under British rule, but when America had the independence and it strengthened the financial sector, that's when things started to change. That's when someone like Alexander Hamilton, and when you work downtown on Wall Street, you know Wall Street starts at the intersection of Broadway and Wall Street. That Trinity Church is right there. That's where Alexander Hamilton is buried. We know Alexander Hamilton was actually killed by a sitting vice president of the United States. He's right there. But Alexander Hamilton, who wasn't born in the US, he worked through that whole concept of the central banking system. You have to develop and you talked about the central bank, so we'll get to that in a second, but you have to develop the financial sector. You need a way to get money from people who are saving it to people who are interested in borrowing it and putting it to a good use, and it will create jobs.
Yeah.
You got to fix the judicial system. You got to fix the financial sector. Those are the two top things. Now, there's a whole lot of other stuff in between there, right?
Yeah.
I would get rid of some ministries. There's some ministries that are just not even useful at all. I would get rid of the Ministry of Information. The reason being, every ministry should have their own spokesperson or their own communications office. You don't need a Ministry of Information.
Yeah.
I would separate the Ministry of Tourism. Tourism needs to be a board, but you would grow the economy if you really invest into tourism, and you need to clean up the country to bring tourists. There are people right now, Gabriel, Jimmy, people are paying good money to go to places where they can sleep in crypts, in cemeteries. There are people out there who are paying money to go sleep in cemeteries, tourists. We have we wrote a paper, me, ANC guy, Dr. Joel King, and the guy who is the former job creator for one of the estates out here, wrote a paper. We did a lot of investigation on how to boost the tourism sector in Liberia. Liberia has everything you need to boost tourism, but we haven't been able to make that happen. Why? Because if you look at the study, the research by Asimoglu and Robinson, they wrote that book, Why Nations Fail. People come to power, they tend to put their kinsmen in place, they tend to put their family members in place, they tend to put other people who do not have the requisite skills and knowledge in place, and you don't get the job done. That's what ended up with our man, Josh Mia. People there from the Southeast in place, because some of them were totally unqualified. But that's the case. You have to fix the central bank. I know the central bank governor right now, by law, he has a 10-year position, but he has a degree in public policy. He worked at JP Morgan Chase, but he was a compliance officer over at JP Morgan. We look at compliance officer as a high-profile security guard.
Who are we talking about now?
The central bank governor.
The central bank governor.
Oh, okay.
He graduated from, I think, Thomas King University in public policy.
Wow.
Over here in the Federal Reserve Bank, we have 12 Federal Reserve districts. The Federal Reserve Bank is responsible, and I think, Gabriel, to your point earlier, you are absolutely correct. The central bank governor is extremely popular, or not popular, powerful, because the central bank governor has the ability to create policies that will lead to job creation. In fact, it's in the CBL law. The mandate of the CBL is to reduce inflation, to increase economic growth, to reduce unemployment. Those are all the key mandates of any central bank, and they copy this stuff all the way from Europe to the United States. So it's the same concept. Federal Reserve Bank is meant to reduce inflation, create jobs, strengthen the economy, and reduce instability in the economy. The person you put at the CBL is extremely powerful. And to Jimmy's point earlier, I would break up the Ministry of Finance, development planning, like places like Botswana. Botswana has they have an economic development department focused on that. Ministry of Finance, development planning, that whole thing, that Ellen combined them into one, separated, let the Ministry of Finance focus on the fiscal policies, and let someone else worry about the economic development and creating some other things that is unrelated to fiscal policies. You got to put somebody strong on tourism. Liberia has the opportunity to do tourism. But one thing Ambassador Boakai, President-elect Boakai said that people should take to heart: you're not going to get any of this stuff done if you can feed yourself.
Right.
So to Jamie's point, you got to boost the agriculture sector. You can't. No, I can't remember where in the world that hungry people are able to do a good job. And Black people, if you don't feed us, we ain't doing crap. and worst of all, you feed us, we might end up sleeping. And I shouldn't be saying that.
Empty bed can't stand.
Exactly.
I shouldn't be saying that. But there's just so much that needs to be done in Liberia. But let me close on this. None of this stuff is going to happen if you don't have money.
I was going to ask you that. I was going to ask you, what is the first, because you need money. So what is the first move? What is the first move?
Actually, since you guys brought that up, let's just jump into it, because I had it as one of my questions. Actually, I had it at the last question, but I'll bring this up. Where do we get the money to carry out all of the policy? Where?
Yeah,
like,
you see, that's the
you were to take over right now. So let me give you a premise.
Now, give it to Jimmy. Here's the problem.
Yeah, let me give you guys a premise.
Yeah.
So I don't know how accurate this is, but Amar Conan posted, I think it was probably yesterday or today, that the government of Liberia hasn't been paying on the war bond debt for 60 days, right? That's 60 days. I don't know how accurate that is, so I'm quoting him on that. Now, if you haven't been paying on your debt for 60 days, which is technically 2 months, that means you don't have the money within the budget to do that, right? I mean, there could be fiscal issues in terms of, generating revenues, right? We have currently right now a debt load of $2 billion, which interest payment is coming due annually to be $100 million, which is about 12% of our budget. We know we have an economy that isn't productive, that is solely government-based, meaning that the private sector is literally non-existent. Everybody that mostly work in the government in our country works in the government. You are coming into this administration with an elaborate, I think when I read his economic agenda, we call it platform, 50 page, right? Where do you get the capital, the money? Where do you deploy it to effect change? But most importantly, where do you get it? How do you generate it? Where do you look?
Man,
over to you guys.
Jimmy, you give me a few minutes. Let me.
No, I wanted that question for you. Go right ahead.
So first of all, when you miss your debt payment, you're in default. That's
defaulted. Yeah.
That's not sugar-coated. You're in default. And when you're in default, because this is what happened to Ghana, right?
Yeah.
Ghana was going out to the sovereign debt market. They were going out, they were borrowing billions of dollars. Why? Because Ghana had very good credit rating with the big three, right? Fitch, Moody's, Standard & Poor's. Dun & Bradstreet doesn't really give credit ratings in that sovereign space. But the big three was giving Ghana good credit ratings, so Ghana was able to borrow money. But the problem was Ghana borrowed the money, they didn't put it to good use. And then they missed a debt payment. They started first begging for help because they knew they were going to miss a debt payment. And then when they did, you're in default. That means the credit has dried up. So here's Liberia's situation. The problem is Liberia, first of all, doesn't have any credit rating. That means they cannot go and borrow money from the sovereign debt market. It's difficult. When they're in the IMF extended credit facility, they can only borrow money usually based on concessions. You can't concession your entire country. You can't mortgage your country's resources like that. You're not going anywhere. You're not going to go anywhere. You keep mortgaging your country's resources. The way how you raise the money it's going to be extremely difficult, but you will need some investments from, first of all, your people in the diaspora. It may sound crazy. You have to tap the diaspora right away. Tell people in the diaspora, look, listen, y'all stop going over to Latin America, Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, Paris, all these places there for vacation. Y'all come home for vacation. I would pay close attention to remittances leaving the country. There's way too much money leaving. Sometimes there's more money leaving the country in the form of remittances than coming in. I want to take a close look at that to see where is all this money that's fleeing in the country going. I want to check that out as well. Now, this other strategy is a long-term strategy. It's not really tactical to get the money right now, but you have to start doing your whole audit, lifestyle audit and stuff, and start doing clawback, meaning you're taking money from people, ill-gotten wealth, and you do asset recovery. You have to do some asset recovery. But more importantly, you will have to approach the IMF and the World Bank. And you saw when COVID hit, right? COVID hit in March of 2020. When COVID hit, the IMF, World Bank is a supranational bank. They came up with a program where you could defer paying your sovereign debt because of situation, because COVID led to an economic downturn, global economic downturn. So it's possible for you to get some sort of a deferral in terms of making loan payments as you get your house in order. So the president-elect will have to approach the IMF. He has to come down here to Washington, D.C., talk to the folks at the IMF, talk to the folks at the World Bank to see if he can have some space, some budgetary space, defer some of the current interest payments and loan payments to get things in order before he starts getting back on his feet. But he will have to generate a ton of money quickly. Tourism is one place you can look. You have to borrow money at some point, and you have to be able to see if you can borrow money from the diaspora. The central bank doesn't have the ability, like over here in the US, they're always running out of money. So what do? The Federal Reserve Bank will usually issue US treasuries to get money. That's how the US government will get money. They borrow money, whether it's from Japan, China. I think Ireland lends a ton of money to the US. The US issue the equivalent to Liberia's like CBL bills or CBL bonds. But CBL doesn't raise enough money to help the current government. So he would have to approach the supranationals, the World Bank, the IMF, the African Development Bank, Asian Development Bank, and some of these other big banks and see if they're able to create some credit facility to give him time to organize the economy and get things rolling again. But he would have to talk to these big supranational banks. That would be one of the strategies that I would employ. But he needs a domestic policy advisor. He needs a domestic policy advisor and a job creator to help him get jobs. If you don't start creating jobs right away for the young people, then you're going to run into trouble eventually. Sorry, Jimmy, I took up too much time.
No, not at all. I was very keenly. I like your point. They're going to have to do something in quickly. From my observation, a lot of African countries, they tend to do just what you said. You warned against mortgaging their minerals resources. We saw this. What happened in the other day in Zambia? They borrowed huge amounts from China. China has always been willing to give. If you know, I saw one comment here that China is there, but we'll examine that. And the conditions under which they did, if they were to default on payment, then the Chinese will control their copper resources. That's what one of their main exports, copper, and that's exactly what happened. So how do this new administration, how will they protect themselves against the lure of mortgaging? Because that's easy. That's always been the lowest hanging fruit. Take our iron ore and give us 50 years in advance. And so we can use the money to do that. So yeah, 50 years in advance, but if we're going to give it to you 50 years in advance, we're going to reduce it by this. And say, yeah, bring it. And for the next 50 years, your next generation don't have that iron ore is just in the ground, is for somebody else. You don't own it. So, but this is the main way African countries have been managing to generate revenue. So, what the real way, well, maybe you guys may agree with me, the real way of generating revenue is value added production. In other words, you're not just taking the minerals and selling it, but you make doing something. Either you could create a steel plant to smelt the iron, or if it's whatever it is, it goes to series of production. Those different levels, series of production creates jobs, create money at each level. In other words, we have to increase productivity in the country so that we can get that money. So in the short term, what do? Do you take the temptation of, okay, we did gold and diamond. This is a lot of this is already mortgaged. I think they're going to spend at least a year just figuring out all the different agreements that they have entered, and before how they extricate themselves out of some of these agreements are not fortuitous, but it is quite an exercise. So, what do they do first? I think that's what that we're talking about. I think that's when your foreign policy will need to kick in. You will need to come to an agreement with your partners, your best partners, that look, this is where the country is, and we're going to take the country this. And you need to convince them that you have the team, the knowledge, the skill and ability, and the forecast, and your forecast has to show it
Mhm.
that you will be able to whatever, aside from what all the debt you're in, because when they look at you, they're going to look at your debt burden, but you'll have to convincingly tell them, leave that, disregard that for now. This is what our 5-year plan, and in this 5 year, then we will be able to address all those issues down the road. So I think your foreign policy right now has to go to work.
Yeah.
That's what I understand.
Yeah, whoa, I, I think I wanted to save that question for last until Larry just, you know, jump right into it. And I think the reason why, the reason why I wanted to, because it's a very loaded question. And I think both of you guys touched on everything. Larry talks about the outflow of, remittances out of the country, you know, uh, renegotiating, going back on the table with the World Bank and the IMF. Uh, talks about, I think we do issue some treasury, but nobody participating in it because nobody trusts in the government to be able to pay them back. But they're there, like you said, once, if they're able to now come to the diaspora and now convince the Liberian, if you're paying good year on the interest rate on that, people will buy in that instead of buy the treasury instead of go putting their money in the saving bank, and doing that. And that will give you a lot of capital. And I think, Jimmy, you talk about, mortgaging the resources of the country. You know, um, but did you guys think about a bloat that the government is bloated itself, and if they're able to plug some holes in there? Because I saw it when I went to Liberia first time well, second time in 2019. I won't call the ministry name. I went to one of the ministry. He was sitting in the deputy minister. He was sitting in his office, but he had, I think, about 3 or 4 people that he could just point to do things. I mean, for me, I think the government, being the biggest employer in the country, it is bloated. And I think some of that needs to be, they need to, if if you want to get money from somewhere, you have to cut the government, the size of the government, and make it a lean, efficient government. And take some of that money and saving that you're doing to that you're going from the cutting to put it somewhere. But I think the question I want to pose to both of you here is that if we have a default, we do have a default right now, right? If what Amara stated is true, that means we have a default. How, you know, likely is it that you have a default, we are able to go back to the drawing board, back to the IMF, and they're able to listen to it, given that we have a default. Because in a financial world, once you have a default, you're literally out of bounds. You have to get caught up again before they can do anything onto that debt. So do you think that actually put us at a very disadvantage in terms of having negotiating power to really say, hey, either we want to suspend our debt for maybe 3 months, 6 months, a year to get our fiscal order in check, or we're going back there restructuring? I don't think restructuring is an option right now because of the rates that are out there. So we probably have a lower interest rate than we can get out there. So I think, but if we were to go suspend, to say we want to ask them to suspend, we don't have a leveraging power because we're in default right now. What are the chances of that?
I think you might have some leniency because it's a new government coming in place. So there may be some leniency because the new government in place. But there's also, I mean, if you believe in Santa Claus, you believe in Christmas, there's also this possibility that the MCC compact can fall from heaven.
Yeah.
And you may be able to tap into the MCC compact as a means of some economic development. So hopefully the folks over at MCC will look kindly upon Liberia, because the first time Liberia passed, they didn't actually get the compact, which statistically most countries, when they pass the first time, they usually don't get it. Some do get it the first time. But the second time, the odds of you getting it is even better, right? So maybe Liberia lucked out, Santa Claus shows up, and Liberia gets this compact. So that will also help in the economic development. But Actual Factual on the YouTube channel is making some very good points in terms of the tourism and JG.
Diaspora.
Yeah, JG, because Actual Factual, I wish Actual Factual, you put your real name there, I give you credit for what you're saying. And Darling Winwood, I mentioned Darling earlier. Yeah, and also JG eventually will come to the comment by JG talk about, we are making some excellent point there. But what Actual Factual is saying, I heard that the guy who actually ran Donald Trump's campaign in New York, right? We were in Liberia together. He was so curious. He wanted to see. He heard so much about the beaches and stuff in Liberia. He wanted to see the ocean and stuff. So one of my men took us over there to a Marshall. He showed us the lagoon, showed us the beach. The guy was like, wow. Because the guy lives in Florida, right? He lives in Florida. So he's like, wow, this could be a great destination for tourism. People would love to come here, do some deep water fishing. If you read the report, the CIA fact book on Liberia, tourism is mentioned in there. You know, people can catch barracuda, do some other deep water fishing and stuff like that. But the one thing he said, which is what Actual Factual is saying, he said, you can't have people bringing multi-million-dollar yacht over here and then they have to walk through all of this poverty. It just wouldn't seem fair to them. It just wouldn't look right, because you have so many people in deep poverty, and then you have all these million-dollar yachts just right off the ocean over there. It would be extremely difficult to make that happen. So, you know, Actual Factual, what you're saying was what I heard firsthand from someone who see this stuff, someone whose father was one of the founding members of one of the largest investment bank on Wall Street. Right. So you got a point there. You know, you got a point there. I'm not going to take that away from you. I wish you would drop your name in the comments. I give you credit for that. But yeah, to your point, Gabriel, in terms of approaching the World Bank after you've defaulted, I think there's some opportunity, being there's a new administration in place. But the World Bank will want something. The World Bank will want something, because the last time, 2018, this government, the current government came in, I think they spent so much time partying. They spent so much time with the whole missing banknotes fiasco, which led to double-digit inflation right away, which led to another scam when they said they were doing mop-up. They were tapping money from the Federal Reserve Bank in New York, 25 million or 17 million. We don't even know what happened to that. But what happened within that point? What happened within that point is you have an opportunity where, when they went to the World Bank, and it's on the IMF website, when Simon Toy approached the IMF, he wrote a letter saying, look, we need some help over here. What did the IMF ask them in return? The IMF said you have to do harmonization. The IMF will want something. And to your point, Gabriel, if you have a bloated government, the IMF will say, look, part of your issues is your recurrent expenditures is just way too high. You know, salaries, it just account for way too much of the money you're collecting in revenues. You got to reduce that. But every time I've noticed that the IMF do this harmonization, I'm surprised what happened in Liberia. When you do this harmonization, someone ends up paying the price. The IMF told Ghana to do harmonization. If you look historically, after the president of Ghana did harmonization, he was removed from office. In Argentina, IMF told, and Argentina, you know, Argentina always been suffering from super inflation, devalued currency. You know, the Argentina peso is just garbage, right? IMF told Argentina to do the same thing. What happened? There was massive protests in Argentina. They told Greece to do the same thing. Massive
Greece did the same thing, and Greece kept weighing the European Union down to the point they weren't trying to let them in the euro. I don't know if they even let them in, right?
Yep. They struggled. The IMF told Liechtenstein to do this whole harmonization. Liechtenstein, the little small country out there in Europe, Liechtenstein said, no, you know something, Paul Kruger, you guys said, we're not going to do this harmonization. We're going to try to see if we can do something else. And what happened? Liechtenstein managed to get itself out of the fix. And today, the Liechtenstein currency is worth a whole lot more than even the US dollar, right? So the IMF will want something in return. So what does President Boakai put on the table to give the IMF to appease them, to make them happy, to be able to get some fiscal space, to be able to do some of the things that he wants to do? It's going to be difficult. You know, fixing Liberia is not going to be easy. It's going to be extremely difficult, and all hands have to protect. But I don't know, man. You know?
No, but Larry, you're on point, and this is why I mentioned foreign policy. You have to think out. They will have to think out of the box. It's unfortunate that Comrade Twe didn't use other people knowledge and sense, because they got Liberians who have the intelligence to bring up new ideas. The IMF is not going to provide you a solution. They got their cookie cutter things that they want you to go by, and they're out to making money. You have to come up with unique solutions for yourself. And this, for instance, this same guy you're talking about, actual factual, he touched on it, to tap in your diaspora.
But Jimmy, we're assuming actual factual is a man, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he's been a mystery. I'm sure he's laughing at us.
I know.
He's been
I'll track that actual factual. We'll get the deal.
Right.
Yeah. Good shout out to actual factual.
Tap into the diaspora, and I want to tell you, I'm well acquainted with the Black Congress, and there's a movement right now. African Americans want to have more involvement in Africa. They have billions of dollars. They are an economic force right now, and they're looking to see how they can invest their money in Africa. Now, that is why you see Kenya and Ghana been opening their doors to attract this. What I've seen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've seen a pushback in Liberia for Liberians encouraging even their own Liberians to come back. There is some pushback against that, and discouraging them. There's something about that. So we haven't been able to tap into this resource, this external resource, because we don't really want them coming around. We don't, and it will behoove us if we allow this new, because they bring in new ideas, they bring in capital, you know, and a lot of times it's all you need is some new ideas to change the mindset. And so that's why I say your foreign policy, because you're going to have to negotiate deals out of the box, not the IMF or the World Bank. They have their stringent rules. You're going to have to sell your objectives, your new plan to people and make them believe in you, that and that they will give you a chance, you know, to grow, to launch your program and change the way things are done. And that is why I said that the foreign policy is going to be very, 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 very key in negotiating better deals for us, so we can start seeing prosperity in the country.
Yeah,
It's gonna.
Jimmy, I agree with you, but this is not new though. Our disdain for outsiders is not new, especially foreigners that, opening up to foreigners, as even our own that are in the diaspora. If you remember history correctly, Marcus Garvey, right? When he wanted to
Mhm.
go to Liberia to use black capital to become a model country for black capitalism, right? As Liberia is supposed to be the example. What did we do to him? We kick him out of there. So it's a historical trend that has never subsided to this point. Right now, nobody is going into there's another guy here. His name is Jimmy. I think he's a former chief of staff for John Kerry. He started the Eco Home. Somebody correct me here if you're on this thing. Correct me here. His name is, I forgot. His name is James. James, I think Brennan. He started the Eco Homes in Liberia. I mean in Ghana. I think he did some in Kenya as well, right? And he was trying to go to Liberia. He started that there. They kind of finesse him out of his money, and he left. I don't think he's ever returned to that country. We do the same thing to our own, diaspora, Liberian in the diaspora. But I think it comes from laziness, because if I always say this, it comes from laziness because if I am in the same, let's say I'm coming to invest, or you feel, even if forget me investing, let's say I'm coming to compete for a job, it's a level of competition that should now entice you to say, I'm going to compete with this guy, right? But by doing everything you can to outline that person or to push them aside because you feel they're diaspora, they're this and that, they're coming to take your job, it creates this level of, this is why we just take what's available, right? We just take the people that are available and we end up falling victim. And we're looking at the other country, Ghana, like you said, there's capital inflow in Ghana. Kenya, go to Kenya, you see development. All the other African countries, we seem to be the exception. So it's not a new trend. It goes back into our history. I do agree with you. I do agree with you on that.
Before you go on, Thomas Kane, I don't know if you want him to come over. He's asking to come on. You know Thomas, right?
Did you send
He's
him the
always,
link?
yeah, he's always on with Ja.
Yeah,
You
if
know.
he has the link, he can join.
Oh,
He can.
okay. Let me do that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So let's. Larry, you have any follow-up thoughts on that?
No. I see some wonderful comments over here. Comments from Helena. I love those comments right there. Darling. Somebody said something about harmonizing the lawmakers. Like that. And actual Kaisha did tell us he's a young man, so that's cool. But JG talked about what's if there's a number to call in. So yeah, the conversation is great because we
Okay.
had these
So
conversations in 2017 and we saw what happened. So hopefully there will be some lessons learned from 2017. And maybe the new administration coming in would do something a little bit different. It'll be more successful because look, the Liberian people are tired going through this vicious cycle of poverty. We have no reason to be poor in Liberia. It's like people go out of their way to keep certain people poor because they use that as leverage or power over these people. Yeah, so definitely, hopefully, we can have these conversations. Maybe somebody will listen to us and say, look, I listened to FOL and I heard some good ideas. Maybe I can pass this on to the president-elect. Maybe he can take some actions. But
I have my reservation on that, but I'll keep them to myself for now. I think you mentioned a comment on here. Which one is it? Who's the person?
The one from Helena, in terms of a smaller government,
Right.
spend that money in other places, especially like education. Yeah, you see that.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay. She said the only way things can work in Liberia is when there is system. if there is no system, nothing will work in Liberia. And the new president must be the example. He needs to work hard and get things done.
Well, there's another one before that. I think it might be another one earlier or later. I think it's somewhere in the chat.
Is that from the same person?
Yeah, I think it's in
Okay, I
the
think
other
that is
chat
probably
where
further down.
she talks about, because I think that what
The one
Helena.
she agrees.
No, yeah, what she said. Yes, I agree. Yeah. Read that.
Okay, so she said, yes, I agree. Smaller government will do better than larger government. And yes, government can save money to spend in other places like education and health and agriculture. Yeah.
Yeah, you
You
see what
know,
Helena is saying? Oh, go ahead, buddy.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
Okay, this is something I have just suggested. I started suggesting it last year.
Mhm.
I know very well by you keeping a lot of people on payroll.
Yeah.
And they go to work and they do absolutely nothing, you're losing doubly. Let me explain why. Number one, they're not being productive. You're just paying them for nothing. They're hardly getting anything. They go there, waste hours. You paying them whereby if they were doing something else, they could be more productive. Their productivity adds to GDP in the country. So by keeping them on the payroll, you're really not doing Liberia a favor. You're not doing us a favor. We have to look. We're too hung up on take a government job instead of making people more independent. So
Yeah.
I had suggested that, you know what, you give all these people what's that when they give you severance pay.
Yeah.
You get them 2,000-3,000, whatever the amount that you can accept, and you'll probably need to borrow money to do this. But you give them, you say, look, I will set you up. You take $3,000. Let's put a figure out there. Take $3,000, but you don't have no more to do. Go in the private sector. Go do business. A lot of people, they will go out there and take that money and invest and do business. And
So
then you
that is a segue into our next question. Man, you guys keep reading my mind, but keep going, land your thoughts. I'll put it on.
then you reduce the government.
Yeah.
Now you have only people who are essential. Number two, they have to be capable of doing the work, because the 80-20 rule usually is 20% of the people usually just do 80% of the work. That's just common all global. So by reducing them now, make them capable. Now you have a streamlined government. You have taken those people, you've made them productive. In the long run, when they start producing in the private sector, more GDP, more production, more their children benefit, the neighbors benefit. You have a win-win. But just to be crippled by this, give a person a government job, that we need to get out of that mold that has been stagnating us from 1827, 1847 or 1822. We need to get out of that mindset.
Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
So, Larry, any thoughts?
Yeah, to Helena's point, and I love what the conversation these guys are having on the chat, cutting government thing. But to Helena's point, over here in the States, a lot of government entities, they have some workforce development department, right? You have to, in fact, the reason, one of the key areas that Liberia failed on the MCC compact is because they failed the scorecard on effective government. And that has to do with the capacity of civil servants to get the job done in an effective manner. They failed on that. So the government is not working at its true potential. Why? Because we don't invest in workforce development. So the government is bloated. To Gabriel's point earlier, I visited one of those ministries and I just saw a bunch of people just sitting in the hallways. I was like, is this how it is in most of the ministries? People just hanging around. Their own government payroll.
Exactly.
They're not really doing anything.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
That is why you have a bloated government. So
Waste.
Yeah.
Nothing but waste. Complete waste.
Absolute waste. So two things. And I saw someone mention using the OECD to try to get money to Liberia. That's doable, but here's the problem: not just the OECD. USAID sends, not you, the State Department, the U.S. State Department sends hundreds of millions of dollars to Liberia every year. Not just Liberia, other countries. But here's the problem: most of the money they sent, I would say roughly 60 to 70% of the money they sent to Liberia, it turns around and it comes right back to the U.S. The reason being, a lot of the work, and don't say Larry say this, so if you get a chance, go to the Executive Mansion website, look under vacancies or one of those categories, not just the Executive Mansion website. Go to foreignassistance.gov, put Liberia in, and let me tell you now why I said 60 to 70% of that money is coming back. Because the people who are doing the work in there are here from the States. There are large NGOs. Even places like Johns Hopkins University, you have places like Tetra Tech, you have places like FHI 360, Family Health International 360. Even the money that was given to help the central bank boost the economy is done by an NGO based in Virginia. So all the money you see that is given to Liberia in foreign assistance, it turns around and come right back. Because why? The people from these NGOs go over there to do the work and they pay themselves a king's salary. What needs to be done is the new administration needs to say, okay, listen, let's see if we can boost the capacity of the people over here to do the work. So when the money comes in here, the people here are doing the work, the money stays right in here. But here's the problem. I was actually at an IMF meeting with some government officials when one of the head of from the State Department was asking the Liberian government, why is the Liberian government asking some of the big NGOs to tell them the work they're doing in Liberia? The NGOs had complained to the State Department. You know, USAID is under the State Department, right? The NGOs had complained to the State Department that the Liberian government was tracking them in terms of the work they were doing. And I was like shocked because I spent my dissertation actually studying foreign assistance to Liberia, right? So I was shocked. I said, well, wait a second, why are NGOs complaining about the Liberian government asking them what the hell they're doing in the country? It was fascinating. So the State Department was actually more interested in appeasing the NGOs as opposed to making sure that we're getting the job done. That's why sometimes when people say all the money that is sent to Liberia, we don't see anything from it. That's because the money doesn't stay there to help in the economic recovery. It turns around in this vicious turnstile and it comes right back to America. But you can change that. How? Other countries have done it. Other countries have done it. Singapore is what? Just a big giant rock. Hong Kong is a rock. They have no resources. But look at Hong Kong today. They're doing so much better. We need to get off foreign aid. We need to find a way to feed ourselves. I know people are saying, oh, World Bank is not going to let Liberia grow rice.
Yeah, I saw that comment.
I disagree with that because I know World Bank makes a ton of money by lending money to poor countries. They made over $4 billion or so, I think 2 to 3 years ago, you know. So there's...
But Larry, welcome. I'm glad Connie just joined us. Welcome to the discussion, Connie. We know you will have a lot to add to it. But Larry, this argument, and I can tell you where it came from, and we took it apart years ago in undergrad. They tell you do not have the comparative advantage to grow rice. In other words, they tell you, listen, if you're going to grow rice in Liberia, it's going to cost you, I'm just throwing this figure out here, maybe $5 to produce a bag of rice, or maybe $2. Whereby in India and in China, it costs them 50 cents. So by right, don't grow rice because you can get it cheaper over there. Do something else that you're more productive in. But that undermines your independence, your ability to feed yourself. That comparative advantage should never be applied to your ability to be self-sustaining. you know, and as a result, if prices change globally, it affects you directly because you're so dependent. Number two, if you're going to remain a sovereign nation, you have to increase your capability to grow what you eat, what you consume. And if your consumption habits are in tune with something foreign, then it's time to revise that, introduce something local in your diet.
Yeah.
Mr. Connor, welcome.
Mr. Khan,
Thank you.
welcome to Focus on Liberia. I believe this is your first time joining us, and thank you for joining the discussion. Today we're talking about a Boakai administration. What do we think are going to be the priority to effect change in that country? I'm sure you missed, probably if you're watching, you probably missed most of the question, but we, you know, please do introduce yourself for our audience, and this is your first time on here.
Um, Thank you so much. This is my first time on this show.
Yeah.
I'm on the sister show on FOL, which is Tough Talking Thursday.
Yeah.
And so I was listening and I saw the questions. They were just too interesting because we should be talking about these things right now.
Yeah.
I think we shouldn't give the new government a rest. I think one of the problems that the we are government led into is that they took a lot of time to celebrate their win.
Yeah. I think a lot of those things.
Enjoy, celebrate, and celebrate and celebrate. So
Yeah.
this government should start work from day one. So I think when we have these conversations and raise those issues, they will be very key.
Yeah.
I mean, all of the questions that you ask, where do we turn to the private sector? Very important. What do we do? The reforms we do on the fiscal side, on the monetary side. So they are all very important. I mean, I don't want to take you back to what you've already discussed, but
No, please do go ahead.
on the issue of the rights that is being discussed, my problem with Liberia is that people tell us something and we don't do research to be able to validate what they're saying to us. If anybody tells you that it is not your comparative advantage to develop or grow rice in your country, do a simple cost benefit analysis. You know the countries that you are importing rice from. Find out how much it costs to grow rice in India and pull it on the ship and bring it to you in Liberia, and how much it will cost you to grow rice if you cultivate all of the swamps that you have. And then the other thing is that the birds will eat it. But what if we establish some nets that will stop the bird from eating the rice? So we should be able to do studies to be able to really tell us if we import the rice from India or we import it from Thailand, we import it from this country, it's much more cheaper for us to grow it here. But this thing has been along since I was born. Oh, don't grow rice, don't grow rice. And yet we don't do any studies to be able to validate it. So I think to get rid of these kind of concerns, we do a study. It's very important to bring in consultants and do this kind of analysis. And it will tell you exactly. Perhaps the question is, don't import it from this country, import it from the other country. That would be much more better for you. But I still do think that we have a lot of low land in that country that we can cultivate and be able to produce our own rice. And the point is not that we should not import rice, but can we reduce the quantity that we are importing? Right. Reduce the quantity. If we're spending around $20 million a year, can we call it down to 10 million? Can we call it down to 15 million? Maybe in the 1, 2, 3 years. But my point is that we have to do these studies ourselves to be informed before, rather than just running around with what maybe the World Bank or other development agencies are saying to us. Because in many of these development agencies that are run by countries that are producing these commodities, and they might have their own interests.
Yeah.
Totally agree with you there. And even that, if we talk about creating jobs, doing jobs, it also is. When I remember back in undergrad when I was at LU, we found out that over 90%, I think it was 80-90% of the workforce in Liberia was into agriculture, but it was contributing less than 5 to 10% to the GDP. In other words, even though they were in agriculture, it was at such a low rate of productivity that it wasn't adding anything to us. So for us to be agriculture, we agree that agriculture should, but we need to make our productivity much more efficient. or we would still be where we are today. In other words, if it's some people do land reform. I remember in India. India is the most successful story of agriculture turnaround.
Yeah.
Before then they were starving, but they did land reform. When I bring land reform, some people, Liberian people, say no, we don't need that. They, but they were able to collectively farm. When y'all put everything together and y'all can farm collectively, all of y'all pay for the machines, all of y'all pay for the fertilizer, all of y'all, we got what we go in Liberia today. I didn't they call it soup, where you go from farm to farm,
It's what do you call it?
where they join the coup. I think they call it coup. They
Okay.
go from one farm to the other farm and they brush it. And they're very efficient. So if we can collectively farm, which is probably the most efficient way to do it because of our low scale and the cost of capital goods that we need to do this, we'll have a better outcome. But so far the way we've been doing it, and just like you said, kind of we need studies. I don't think the way we've been doing it is the best way to do it. But now that we have an agriculturalist as the head of state, maybe we'll see something completely revolutionary now.
Great discussion. And I just wanted to throw this in there before we maybe move on to the next topic, which is I want us to really talk about the private sector, how that can be leveraged if anybody can ever do that. Yeah, I think Larry talked a great deal about this, and I absolutely agree with him. With the IMF, with the Greece, the Argentina, and all these other countries, you can even add right under our nose, Ivory Coast. They just gave Ivory Coast approved $3 billion for Ivory Coast, but that agreement, one of the conditions was that they should privatize the water system and also I think other state-owned enterprises as well. And Ivory Coast absolutely disagree with them on that. Like the water is one of the water system is one of the system they wanted to keep under control. So, and I think kind of alluded to that as well. Usually when the IMF comes in, I think, and we have a whole tendency within our country. I don't know, because we lack the know-how or whatever it is. We're so obsessed with these international community that whatever they say, we take it as if it's the Bible, the Word of God, and we just hold it to our heart, like hallelujah every time. Every time the IMF say those things, we don't evaluate them. We just run with them. But some of those things, like we've seen that bankrupt country, as I said, when I was in grad school too, there was a case study on Greece. They were weighing down. At one point, Germany was the only country that was carrying the entire EU. And Greece, every time they build them out, they will go back to the IMF. They build them out, they go back to the IMF. They build them out, they will go back to the IMF, right? And that's because the IMF does not have, contrary to what we believe, they might give you money. Not every money is good. They do not have a good track record of getting country out of poverty and getting them to an economic sustainable path. So, and I think this is something we should really take to heart as Liberians, and those of you that will end up as ministers and whatever else you might do in the government. That's something you should really. There are development professionals out there, policymakers out there that will blatantly tell you that. Like this, tell you if the IMF come to you, they say you should do blah blah blah, such and such and such. Don't do that. Do not do that, because if you do that, it's a trap that they put you in. But because in our case, we need money, and so we don't have the credit rating, and because we need that money, we just go and take whatever they say and whatever condition they put under that money attached to that those funds for us to take, we just take them. And that put us in a straight jacket. Your hand tied, your feet tied, your head straight up. You cannot do a thing. You cannot turn left or right. You just have to fall into it. And at the end, we end up falling victim to it. So I agree with all of you on that. But I think that's something that really needs to be honed. We need to understand and make sure that we don't repeat that as a country.
Well, let me ask Larry. Larry, why do you think I got my notion? But why do you think we just simply accept these dictations from of the IMF or whosoever? Why are we so receptive to stuff like that?
Because we usually end up with a government that doesn't have the technical know-how to generate the revenue they need. So you see, when you end up with people in positions in governments that do not know the true functions of that particular ministry, they don't know how to grow the economy, but you need money for your economy, they will end up running to the World Bank, right, or the IMF, because we don't have a true strategy in terms of how to what leads to economic growth, which is really meaning the private sector. They don't grasp that concept. But 2 points real quick. The second one is really why Gabriel is so right in terms of what he's saying, the IMF record. And I will tell you, because I actually did a study and wrote something on that as well, and I'll touch on that in real quick. But on the rice piece, if you look at it, who actually benefits from rice not being imported in Liberia? That's the first question you should ask yourself. If you're not imported, if rice is not imported in Liberia, if rice is grown in Liberia, who suffers economically, financially? Who benefits economically, financially with rice being imported into Liberia? If you ask yourself that question, then you'll understand who is pushing this idea of not growing rice. Because the first thing is, when we came into power, one of the first things he did was he signed the executive order suspending tariffs on rice importation. Madison Lee had been doing it. They always, because they got this notion that the rice importers have convinced, I mean, we understand the importance of rice in Liberia. If you have an open market on importing rice completely into the country, the cartel that is importing rice will suffer. They don't want rice grown in the country because it puts them out of business. This stranglehold they've had on the Liberian rice economy for so many years, they will immediately go out of business when Liberians start growing their own rice, because the price of rice is going to fall dramatically. More people will be able to get access to rice. So I bet when President-elect Boakai comes in place, the rice cartel would approach him and ask him to continue this executive order of suspending tariffs on rice imports. And more than likely, will end up doing it. But if he catches on to it, maybe by the end of the year or the year after, and he starts working towards rice production in the country, you will see how things will change. To the point Gabriel made in terms of the IMF, does it have a good record? The IMF does not have a good record. And I can't think of the economist who did a study. I don't know if it was Easterly or one of these other economists who came out and said, the policies that the IMF put in place, we don't even know where they were grabbing some of the numbers from to make these predictions or to suggest some of these or make these recommendations. Because every time they make these recommendations, something bad happens in this country, right? We saw the coup d'etat in Ghana when they followed the IMF recommendation. We saw the riots over in Greece following the IMF recommendation. We saw what happened in Argentina. We saw other countries struggle. We saw the harmonization in Liberia, but Liberia being as peaceful as they are today, they swallow it up. But the IMF doesn't have a good record. So this is so interesting, because since the coup d'etat, Liberia, every time they take one step forward, they end up taking 2 steps back. It just doesn't seem to work. Because when you think Liberia is doing well, something unfortunate happened. Because when Elena came into power, a few years after that, what happened? We had the financial crisis, right? Wall Street collapsed because of the mortgage market. Elena struggled. Right after the end of the financial crisis in 2011, 2 years later, what happened? Ebola hit, right? December 2013, Ebola came in from Guinea, hit Foya, boom. All of the NGOs and all of the people in there, they fled the country. That was also followed by the UN leaving the country as well. When things finally stabilized and we say, okay, now we got Ebola under control. Which shockingly, when we came in, even though Ebola was under control, but Sierra Leone managed to grow the economy. Guinea, who was also afflicted by Ebola, grew the economy. But somehow Liberia's economy didn't grow. But that's another story. But just like we thought we were cool now, we got Ebola under control. We're back on track. What happened? March of 2020, COVID hits, right? So every time you take one step forward, you end up taking like multiple steps back, because there's always something down the line that's going to impact. And we don't have a I haven't seen a plan in place in Liberia for these disaster, like a disaster recovery plan. You know, like what's going on in Iceland right now, right, with the whole volcano and all that stuff. We don't have that kind of disaster plan in Liberia to stabilize the economy when something happened, because our economy is based on the extractive sectors.
Yeah.
So when ArcelorMittal, all these people then leave, what happens? The economy collapses. So until somebody comes in, Ellie talked about it, she never did it. Until somebody comes in and says, look, listen, we got to diversify this economy right now, right here. Let's get this thing done. We got to be self-sufficient. I know, and I love the fact what Thomas said early on. People need to have these kind of conversations. But Liberians, they don't want to hear this stuff. They want to see people fighting. They want to see people duking it out, you know. Maybe you bring Alex Coffey over here and I start cussing him a little bit, then more people will join the show and pay attention. I love Alex Coffey.
Alice is based somewhere else right now.
Is there a number we can put up? We're going to put up a number of people asking to call in.
Can I make a quick point before we go to the callers?
Yeah. Okay. Unfortunately, let me say that. Unfortunately, no, we don't. We didn't. Typically, we don't do. We didn't think that conversation.
Okay.
We know it. Typically,
Okay.
not a lot of people watch us, so we don't really do calls. But even though we believe the thing we talk about are very important, so we now typically don't do calls, so we never really plan for it. Sorry, put your comments in there. Whatever comments you have, we will go to the comments.
You see what Darling said? You see what Darling mentioned, that when something happens in Liberia, disaster recovery, a representative would donate a bundle of zinc and a bag of rice. It's so sad. It's true, but it's sad. It shouldn't be that way. It's true, but it's sad. You know.
We'll ban him from the comment section. Connor, go ahead, please.
You know, and one thing that Mr. Eastman always talk about on this show is the issue of capacity, human capacity. From the 60s to the 70s and on to now, the whole concept of development was give these poor countries physical asset, help them to build their roads, help them to build their ports and all of that. But around the 1990s on to now, it changed. That if you don't build human capacity, you're not going to move forward. You can go and build the road, you can build all of the ports. You won't be able to move forward. And so all these agencies went and built roads and everything, and people did not maintain it. So right now, you have all these international agencies focusing a lot on human capital. And when you look at human capital, I think the World Bank started to measure human capital for Africa in 2018. Our human capital growth has been 0.32, flat, 2018 to 2023. We've now moved a step. And therefore, we are now building human capital in the sense that the health of the people, their education, the knowledge and skills that they have, we're not growing it. And therefore, they will not be able to meaningfully contribute to any development.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's look at our ministry. Let's look at our Ministry of Finance. How many PhDs in economics do we have in our Ministry of Finance? We don't. We should have people sitting down and doing all of the modeling that we need. If we need to produce rice, they should do the analysis and tell us how investing $1 in rice production, what return do we get? And you'd see the thing like Larry was saying, if we decide to produce rice in Liberia, we don't just produce it and get the rice, but we are creating jobs. And then there will be additional things that will come to it. It will contribute to security. Crime will reduce. So if you are only looking at the cost of importing that rice and you are not looking at these additional benefits, you will always say, oh, it's beneficial. Let's just import it. And the cartel will continue to benefit. But the point I was coming back to is the reason why we rely on the IMF and the World Bank. Every time you see, for instance, our growth figures come out, we go to the end of the year before the IMF tell us the growth of our economy in the previous year.
Yeah.
I think Amla Mame was here recently discussing a paper that three of us wrote and highlighted some of the limitations in what the IMF or the World Bank had done. Right. So growth is such that you project growth forward and then you work towards that growth. But our growth is always told to us backwards. So then how do we move forward? Instead of the Ministry of Finance actually building capacity of young people, support them to go and do these PhDs to come back, we get a lot of people who just come and just raise battle cries and they fill that whole 10th floor of the building. And we just sit there and we do nothing. And then the Ministry of Finance get reduced. So right now it's the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning. On the previous show, Larry and myself were moving back and forth on whether we should have the Ministry of Planning. The ministry is the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning.
Yeah.
And sometimes ministers go in there, they forget the development planning side of it and just do finance.
Yeah.
They just raise money and pay salaries. So then how do we forecast? Right now, countries have these import-export tables. Everything they produce, they track it and see which sector is going in. When we
Yeah.
produce right, which sector is using it? Is it the service sector? Is it this manufacturing sector? And in the end, the calculation of growth becomes adding numbers and dividing them.
Right.
But we don't have any system in place to collect data. And even when you look at the IMF and the World Bank reports on us, they just collect the information from central bank, from LRA, from Ministry of Finance, and write the reports.
Yeah.
And we don't do it ourselves. Here is a Minister of Finance that helped the MCC to write the constraint analysis in 2013. And you became Minister of Finance from 2018 until now. You could not even do another constraint analysis to see what the real constraint is. We are still depending on 2013 report to tell us that our constraints are energy, roads, and I think some other sectors. So the more we don't research, then we have to sit and
Exactly.
lean on the World
Exactly.
Bank and IMF. And when they tell us something, then we don't do it. We just have to follow. The first thing is that we don't have the capacity to match the World Bank and IMF when they come for these missions. So we sit and listen to them.
Let me say something quick because I know we're running out of time. What Thomas is just saying, and I need you, Gabriel and Jimmy, to help me out on this. Who was it that did that study back in the 60s about growth without development? Remember that paper that came out, Growth Without Development?
Yes.
So I think it was probably Crowler or something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
So here's the thing: what Thomas is saying, and this is what's so shocking with Liberia. At the end of that study, the outcome in order to address the issues was I think the U.S. government gave Liberia up to about $2 million to help with workforce development and to help build capacity, right? They felt that by building capacity, workforce development would lead to more growth within the economy, not just GDP growth, but growth within the people doing the work would be more effective at the work they're doing. But here's the shocking thing. I read a report in 2018 or 2019. U.S. government was giving Liberia money again to do the exact same thing they gave Liberia money from in the 60s, saying they lack the capacity. It's so ridiculous that we keep making the same mistake. We don't recognize that we need to develop our own people to do the work. When you look at the central bank report in terms of remittances leaving, the reason why the remittances are leaving is because we're importing knowledge from the NGOs, and that knowledge is not staying there. So when the NGOs are done, they leave with that knowledge because there's no workforce development or nothing being done whatsoever. So to grow the Liberian economy, to develop the country, to make sure we're food secure, to make sure we have good healthcare, good roads, we have to put more money to education. Going back to what Helena said earlier, we have to spend more money to education because it's education that got Singapore out of the mess they were in.
Yeah.
It was education that when you have a phone call coming in, it's coming from people in the Philippines, in the US, because those countries now are investing more in technology and education. They don't have the natural resources, but they're still developing their countries. There's a lot of work that has to be done, and hopefully we'll have another chance to bring Thomas back so we can carry on this conversation because I know we're at the 5 o'clock mark.
So
let me
with
wrap
that,
up.
with that being said, I think we should jump into the last. It's been sitting out there for a while. So I think Thomas may have segued into it in terms of the human capital development or the capacity building, human capacity. Um, and I think everything you guys says is fundamental in terms of having an effective government. But I think even going back to the growth without development phase, right? Um, in our paper as well, what they realized was that we were just we depended on government aid. All the money that we're getting was just aid, and we weren't really putting that into infrastructure and other things that's supposed to be sustainable, that's supposed to sustain the country. Uh, and I think one of the biggest thing that we keep missing since I think probably the 60s or 70s is the private sector and the business sector, right? Um, Now we do have a president who I think Jimmy referred to him as an agriculturalist. If you guys remember back in the 60s and 70s, was it under Tubber in the 70s, he built the Agriculture and Housing Bank, right? He established, I think by the time his term was off, he had 30 companies, right? At that time, we had a lot of Liberian, these pockets of development that you guys are talking about in the Yikipa, the LPMC, and all of that, right? So he was someone, for me, and we can debate this on a different show. I think he was probably the most progressive president in terms of the private sector, right? Because Liberians were working, there was people from different part of the continent going into Liberia. How do you guys think we can regain that progressiveness that takes the focus away from the government in terms of it being the sole employer, to developing a private sector robust economy that, even though the government might be shaky in terms of revenue, that private sector can, because we have a strong private sector, it is able to sustain the country going forward repeatedly in perpetuity. How do you think that can be done? Yeah, I know it's a loaded question.
It has to do with what JFK said, don't ask what your country can do for you, but more what you can do for your country, right? So people have to come to the aid of their country, and we need to be able to say, look, listen, let's see if we can get money into the private sector. There's no way you're going to grow the economy if you don't put money in the private sector. And also, to Thomas's point, that follows this whole John Maynard Keynes, the Keynesian model, that look, as we start, whether it's a little small farm or somebody, if we start buying stuff Liberia made, that person would not need to go and maybe grow more of that particular thing, need more raw materials, get more of that produce. It will lead to more jobs. People working over there will spend the money within the economy. That will also go to other businesses who will also go ahead and invest into more raw materials. And that's how it's the private sector that gets it done. But in order to grow the private sector, you need to have access to capital, which is something that is missing. You have issues with access to capital because you don't know that you have this huge, and Gabriel, you're a banker, you need to be able to price risk, right? We don't have a credit rating system like the Equifax, the TransUnion, or the Experian. We don't have it, so you don't know people's credit worthiness. I know at one time Liberia tried to do something about it by establishing there was something that picked up from Ghana where you can put some assets as collateral, the collateral registry system with the central bank. Yeah. But again, to Thomas's point, we don't have any data to tell us how well that program worked. We don't collect any data. If I need data over here in the US, I go to data.gov. I can pull data in and perform some analysis. If I need economic data, I can go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, or go to FRED, the Federal Reserve Economic Data Bank of St. Louis, and I can pull real-time data. But in Liberia, we rely on data coming from the World Bank and IMF, who also relies on that data coming from, in some instances, from the Ministry of Finance, who the Ministry of Finance should be getting it from LISGIS, the Liberian Institute, right, of Statistical Geoanalysis. But LISGIS is not doing it. They leave it to the Ministry of Finance. So that entire data could be a big fiasco because the Ministry of Finance may want to make themselves look good. We need to establish data banks. We need to grow the private sector. And to William King's point, we need to have more Liberians in the diaspora invest in Liberia and put our money where our mouth is. That is going to require good leadership. So Boakai and people then we need to come together, make peace after the election, and try to see if we can get all Liberians in the diaspora to come and to the aid of their country. And I think I read somewhere, I don't know if it was Gabriel or Alex that mentioned it, Boakai should take some time when all things have settled down to visit the U.S., have some of these town hall meetings with Liberians in the diaspora and try to get them to invest in Liberia. So great discussion, guys.
But Larry, while I agree with you, oh, sorry. While I agree with you on that, don't we have to sell Liberians on embracing the diaspora? Isn't that one of the things that is challenging us, that we suspect of people coming from the diaspora? We don't welcome them. We treat them, like foreigners, and people want to take obscure us or eclipse our importance. Isn't that something we will have to deal with before engaging the diaspora? What do you think?
No arguments from me. This is why places like Kenya was successful in welcoming their people from Kenyans from the diaspora back home. Ghana had some success in that space. I know we have these situations where Liberians at home on the ground feel that Liberians in the diaspora are coming to take their jobs, right? Because I've sat in meetings over at this college over in Texas, Prairie View, and the Liberians who I think attended Cuttington was trying to do something in the healthcare space. They tried to do online teaching, but when they invested the time and money and they went over to Liberia to try to see if they could get this done, they ran into obstacles because Liberians there were blocking them, thinking they were coming to take their jobs. So you're right, Jimmy. There has to be some leadership where we need to establish trust and let people know that, look, nobody is coming to take your job. We're all in this together. And in fact, at the end of the show, when Gabriel put on the closing theme, I think we can kind of use that as a way to see if we can embrace other Liberians. But we need to be able to do that because I tell you this, the money is in the diaspora.
Yes.
The money Liberia need to grow, it's in the diaspora. You got to get the Liberians there. I know somebody said, I think it was Darwin or one of them said, who wants to go to Liberia, see all this poverty on vacation? But well, let's kind of set that aside for a minute. But the money is in the diaspora. You have to get the diaspora to go to Liberia and invest. It requires good leadership. It requires very, very good leadership to get that done.
I think that is just the point, because my whole thing about the private sector in Liberia is that the government is so much so that if the government does not want the private sector to grow, it's not going to grow. The private sector won't grow. There are entrepreneurs in Liberia, young people who creating their little businesses. If you look at our economy from the early 90s, from like 7 billion, we are now around 34 in terms of GDP. The size of the economy is growing. That means people are investing.
3.4.
Yeah, 3.4. The people are investing. They are buying their own motorbikes. They are buying their own kekes. People are not sitting. They are doing stuff. But for the private sector to be able to grow, the government will have to take giant steps to let the private sector to grow. And the point is that the public sector is very extractive. You want to establish a business. Even when you go to pay taxes, in some instances, people want you to bribe them before you can pay the tax. That doesn't help the private sector. It's not going to help the private sector to grow. We've tried a couple of times to set up these funds. I remember the central bank under Ellen set up this fund for people to build houses. They also set up this fund for farmers. And when they set up the fund, government officials will go behind, use other people and go and take these funds that are meant for farmers. So until governance can improve, it will be very difficult for the private sector to grow, even though they are struggling. There are people who have established their businesses for a couple of years now. They've come a long way in really supporting these businesses to be able to grow. So once we can be able to minimize corruption in the public sector and be able to build capacity there so people can do these policy works that they need to do. One of the ministries that I'm always concerned about is the Ministry of Commerce. We have all this work that we did for Liberia to accede to the WTO. I think we completed the accession a couple of years ago. What are we benefiting? Now we have the Africa Free Trade Area. You have Kenya and Rwanda saying you can come here, no more visa, come on arrival. It's because they want to attract people. They want people in there. They like these countries. They will take their money there. But we've not even passed the Africa Free Trade Accession law in our own country. And there's a provision in there that I think after a couple of years, the tariff that will be on goods that will be traded between African countries will be practically zero.
Yeah.
So that means we, as a country that depending on trade taxes, when that treaty goes into force, we might not be getting taxes from goods that we import from Nigeria, from Ghana, and other places. So if we are going to lose that money, then we have to find a way to increase our productive capacity so that we can also send things to them.
Thank you.
And this is where before Ellen left, they tried to establish this special economic zone. The law was passed and all of that. Some agencies have been helping us to be able to do that. Buchanan was earmarked as one of the places to start that a special economic zone, to start with adding value to our agricultural products and all of that. But these are heavy lifting. It has to be people that got brain to be able to push these things. So if we just sit down and we don't do the work of it, we will just be importing. We'll not be importing from China again, but we'll be importing from Kenya, from Rwanda, because they've gone far. They are not trying to focus on these things. So I think it's just one, and like Mr. Ismail normally say, it's not too much of the paper, but that discipline to sit down and work. Liberian people with Facebook now, every day people on Facebook, they're not doing the real work.
I'm sorry to say, but we're lazy. I'm sorry to say, and you can disagree. We just like big titles and but in terms of people that need to roll up their sleep, put your head down and do work, no. It's and I agree with all of you, and it's maybe we can revive the agriculture bank, the agriculture and housing bank, maybe as a way to supplement our economy. All these uh, you talk about the small loan scheme that we used to have. um, they've disappeared, so but for me it's there's something that I fundamentally believe that, in as much that we have all these level of expectation from the government, that it all we can invest in the government, we can do all of this, but if we think that we're going to just rely on the government to be the sole provider to advance our country, we're going to be where we are forever. But I believe the private sector, investment in the private sector, um, can help us get us out of the rut that we're actually in. Productivity, investing in small businesses. You know, you know, I I would say this clearly and slowly in our land. I had a argument with someone in our. I think I said this earlier. In our, I'm affiliated with ANC. We had a discussion with somebody and I argued with this guy about the about recapitalizing the banks in Liberia. This and again, and I think it goes to the same thing that you guys was talking. He's local, and I'm in the diaspora, so I guess he felt that he had maybe inside knowledge that I didn't have, a little bit of authority. This individual had the gall to say that we have a capitalized financial system. He has the gall to say that Liberians have access to capital, and if they want to get loans, they can easily get loans. And he and I had to go into it, and I had to give him reason why. Forget comparing us to the Western world, our financial sector, the our regional peers, our financial system is not even on their level. Like we're not even up to their knees compared to how capitalized we're supposed to be, how access to banking and financial services is supposed to be, how imperative that is if we have all the entrepreneurs and human capital. Let's say we develop human capital, they're going to need capital. We need to take risk on Liberians who are innovative. But if we don't have banks that are capitalized, we cannot do that. And if we don't have Liberians starting businesses, that inadvertently strangulate the government from collecting more taxes. Even if you raise taxes, who you raising the taxes for if you don't have enough people starting businesses? So he and I had this argument, and I think, as I said, it was the same disagreement. I think it was that, hey, he's from the diaspora. If he talk too much, he feel like he know more, he will come and take my job. So it's a plethora of problem, but I believe the private sector has to be a strategy for this government if they really want to make some kind of enroll in the economy.
But if I can just make one point, on this issue of the diaspora and the Liberians, I think the tension comes from poverty. Because the relationship that is between diaspora Liberians when they work in the government, and that relationship when a diaspora Liberian opens a business and Liberians are working there, the relationship is not the same.
Yeah.
When you go to Liberia and then you take a job, and then there's this issue with Kokrom and all of that happened in the past, people on the ground get really angry.
Yeah.
That you are privileged out there, you come, the little resources that we have, you take it, and then you have a fallback position. When anything happens, you will go back.
You go back, yeah.
But if you go and open a hotel and they are working there, they will call you boss man all day.
Yeah.
Nobody will make flower with you.
Yeah.
So I think if we improve governance and try to reduce poverty, educate the people a little more, then that contention that we have between the diaspora Liberians and local Liberians is going to shift a little bit. Because and we also bring the merit-based system. If I'm in Liberia locally and I have the capacity to compete with you, why should I worry that you are coming? But because that gap is there in terms of poverty, in terms of skill set, the other people on the ground get really scary. But if we can just minimize this whole issue of poor governance, I think we can be able to address that. And on the issue of the agricultural bank, to me, if we have the money, instead of establishing a new bank, why don't we just put the money in LBDI? It's already Liberia Bank for Development and Investment, even though we have some shares that are owned by other people. But you guys are in the financial sector. My work is more on the macro fiscal side. I do tax related stuff and growth and stuff. I don't know, but I just think we should put the money in LBDI.
Yeah.
So the problem so two things, right? So what Gabriel mentioned in terms of the recapitalization, somebody saying that the banks in Liberia is fully recapitalized, that's nonsense, right? And that also ties into the risk in terms of putting your money into LBDI. If you had a run on the banks right now, if everybody who got money in LBDI would go to LBDI, one of the cardinal rules of banking is that, Thomas, if I show up at a bank, I should be able to have access to my money at any time that I need it. You can't tell me if I'm showing up at the bank because I deposited $1,000 yesterday, I show up at the bank today, you say, oh, I have to wait a week to withdraw it. That means there's an issue with it. The reason why people don't trust the banking system in Liberia is because when you put your money in the bank, there's no absolute guarantee that you can get it out when you need it. In 2013, if you go and you take a look at Madam Sirleaf's annual message, she was complaining about people not paying back loans. Today, if you look at the number of non-performing loans in Liberia, I don't know, recently you guys must have heard that LBDI was complaining that the non-performing loans in Liberia was extremely high. It's around 27%.
Yeah.
What that means is people have taken out loans and they're not making payments on a monthly basis as expected. That money they're taking is not some money that the bankers are printing in some back room. It's other depositors' money they're taking. Mm-hmm. So if those depositors were to come back now and try to get the money, that money is not there. So what they're doing is robbing Peter to pay Paul, or they're running a Ponzi scheme. That's why people don't trust LBDI or some of the banking system. This doesn't apply to all the banks in Liberia. Some of the banks in Liberia are well-run banks, like Echo Bank and some other banks, well-run, so they're not in that situation. In terms of like farming, over here in the U.S., the United States set up things like the Federal Farm Credit Bank, the FFCB. FFCB was established to help farmers, right? They even set up things like Freddie Mac. Freddie Mac is not a government-owned entity. It's a quasi-institution owned by corporations, but it is backed by the full-fledged of the U.S. government, right? Freddie Mac, Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation. Even things like people wants to go to school, student loans, Sallie Mae, Student Loan Mortgage Association, which is completely privately owned right now. That was also set up to help students get money, borrow money to go to college. And you saw that, in fact, one of the reasons that Ghana ran into a problem was they did that whole free tuition thing on money borrowed from the IMF. And again, if you borrow money from the IMF, you're not putting it to good economic use that will have a return on your investment, you're going to eventually run into a deficit issue. That's why Ghana also ran into a credit related issues as well. So yeah, Gabriel, you argue with someone who doesn't understand finance at that level or financial banking at that level. You're just wasting your time, bro. But I know we passed, and I do have a 5 p.m. Eastern time engagement, so I really have to hop off. But we got to bring back Thomas. And then I see we have a new partner on the call.
Yeah, well, I just brought Dr. Moba on because he's going to talk about the mining sector. That's his expertise. Fantastic. He's a mining engineer and a data scientist.
Oh, okay.
Dr. Moba, we're out of time, but go ahead. We would love to hear your input on this.
All right, let me hop off and give you guys the space. So I will listen to you guys.
Okay, Larry, thank you. We'll probably do a follow up on this next week. And then, okay. Dr. Moba, thanks for joining us.
Dr. Moba, do you hear us? It looks like he's frozen. Is he frozen?
Yeah, now he there you go.
You can hear us?
You're muted.
Hello.
Yeah,
okay. Did you hear what I said when I introduced you?
No. I didn't hear.
Okay, so I just introduced who I just said this Dr. Moba, who is a mining engineer and a data scientist. And you'll be making your commentary with respect to the mining industry in Liberia. Staying on the same topic, how will this new administration address the economic plight in Liberia?
Thank you. In short, there are two, long range and short range. The long range will be to overhaul the entire concession agreements, throw away the bogus MD, whatever they call memorandum of understanding with Stella Mittal. That's a long range because that calls for ratification, different sort of concession agreement re-rating. But the immediate range that may not give fruit in 1 or 2 years is like somebody alluded to, adding values to what we have already. We discussed this before. We have the iron ore sector that is being manned and taken away by concessions. Government has royalty that they pay. Why don't you convert the royalty into mineral, processed material? And first of all, you build your own steel plants so that you divert your minerals, the processed mineral, to a steel plant to add values. You can build these plants, whatever they call them, blast furnace, into those areas where they do the export, Buchanan, Beaumont Port. And all they have to do is when they bring the concentrate down, they just convey yours to you through the conveyor belt to your plant. And then you add values, produce iron to do what you can.
Instead of receiving money, right? And that's what you say. Instead of receiving money, you receive
Right.
the produce.
Yeah. Yeah, and if they still want money, you can partition the royalty into percentage. Give me some in money, give me some in minerals. They've already processed it for you. You don't need to pay anybody to process. It's your mineral. That's what you want. Send it to your plant, produce your pig iron. That means you have added value, and you can sell it to them, to wherever it comes from, West African, and then we can grow our economy.
But Dr. Moba,
this is our iron ore, yes?
Quick question. How much of it is already mortgaged? Some of us understand that we've received in advance payments for some of the days. So you've been in the industry. How much of it is already mortgaged to other companies already?
Yeah, it's the royalty that they're talking about. That is, what happens is, it has been happening for many, many years, not just this government of us.
Mm-hmm.
You see that after the coup in 1980, Samuel Doe said there were only $5 million in the bank, right? But how did the Togo government pay the employee? Nobody was not paid, and people were paid on the 27th of every month. How? But yet, when they took over, they only made $5 million in the bank. The reason was the government will go to these concessionaires and take advances in royalty to pay the bills, to pay the workers. So it's this royalty that they have mortgaged. They have not mortgaged the economic mineral deposit. They haven't mortgaged that. And even if the government took loan from the company out, you can take it back in royalty. It's negotiable. It's negotiable. Give me additional royalty for the future in terms of minerals. And then when I make my product, I sell it, I'll pay back sooner than expected. But we can do it. This is our mineral. We cannot let the foreign investor control our mineral, our railroads. They come in and give peanuts. And then soon they will close. And what happened? We have to deal with the unemployment. 2, the government should ensure that parallel agriculture programs are done as the company mine these places. Because when they close, those are the resources that the workers will turn their face to and maintain all the infrastructures. Otherwise, when the mine closed, we're going to have the same problem of 1975, 76, when LMC closed. The infrastructure were there, but there was no job. There were no jobs there. So, Asalamita, beginning now, we're going to identify a plot of area for agriculture purposes, and you begin to develop these in collaboration with the government. So when you close, The people don't have to leave. We still have the schools, the hospitals, and everything. The workers just turn themselves back to agriculture, and then they maintain the facilities. They don't have to move from there. These are immediate steps that need to be taken. It may not be the fruit may not be tomorrow, day after, but in the long run, the people will enjoy. They'll benefit. So those are the two
Excellent.
things. These are the two things I came to say. One is long range, one is short range.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, Doc will be bringing you back to discuss further on this issue. Gabriel?
Yeah. Do you guys have any follow-up comments? Penny?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment on this issue of relying on mining income to run the government. And this is where our governance has been very bad from day one. Every country that rely a lot on these natural resources, they really don't depend on their citizens a lot to pay taxes for them to run the government. And one of the critical things about taxes is that it can help to improve governance, because when the citizens pay taxes, they want to hold you accountable. This is why things like property taxes, for instance, Liberia doesn't pay attention to it. And that's one of the tax that can actually improve the social contract, because other taxes like goods and services, you go and buy, you actually pay the tax, but you don't realize you are paying the tax. But when you pay property tax, you take it from your pocket and you pay. And therefore you hold your government accountable. So our governments in years past have relied so much on this natural resource sector. They don't focus a lot on developing our economy to be able to generate a lot of domestic revenue. And therefore they just govern any way they want to govern, because they care less about the citizens. So because they don't take a lot from you in taxes, they don't also deliver services to you. So they get their resources from the mining sector and the other resources that come from the development sector. Every time we have a budget, we have some kind of aid coming from this other development agency and that other development agency. And so the citizens are on their own and the government is running the show on its own. So until we get back to that point of actually developing this social contract between the citizens and the government, it becomes difficult for us to have accountability. But I think gradually we are moving there. The more we are depleting the natural resources, we don't have iron ore like we used to have in the 70s. We don't have it like we used to have in the 60s. And this is where, for me, I really think that is important, especially for the future generation. We still have a little. We can still go back to those mountains and get some things from there. But 20 years from now, when it is all gone, and you have these young people with no skills, what then do we do? Because every natural resource that we use today, we're actually borrowing them from the future generation. And we need to invest in them so that they can sustain themselves tomorrow.
Okay, I can answer that quickly. I'm sure the show almost over.
Yeah.
There are two things here. You have, when you employ people at the mine, they pay taxes to the government. It's not money that I'm being paid, it's management. Government is consuming those money. Every employee at every mining company pay taxes to the government, and we pay taxes. And you talk about the iron ore industry will soon be depleted. I beg to differ a little bit. Science and technology has improved. Beneficiation has cut down the cut-off grade from 45 to 30%. And as we improve, we're going to go even 20%. That means those things that we threw away at 45 have become iron ore again. Mineable economic mineral deposit. And as we improve the iron beneficiation processes in the plants, we're going to lower the iron ore grade. That means we'll always have iron ore economic mineral deposit for a very long time. The things we threw away in the 50s are now iron ore. That's why these guys are coming back. They're not going to the mine, they're going to the tailing ponds. That's why they're in Bombing Hill now. They're not mining, they're going to the tailing ponds. Because the iron ore has improved in its capability of being beneficiated through science and technology. So the curve will keep going up and the waste become all behind us. So it's a long run. So we need to be very serious.
I totally agree. This is your area. My own point is that in the longest run, we'll run out of it.
Yeah.
But we'll also run out of rubber. You see, nothing is persistent. So we have to make use of the time now so that we prepare the younger generation and shift from mining to something that parallel agriculture or whatever we can do. So when those things are depleted, we just shift that attention into there, and all of those infrastructure will revert to the government. They don't have to move from one point.
I agree to your point. I was just saying, in the longest run, we cannot continue to rely on the natural resources. We need to have
In the long run.
And on the issue of personal taxes, of course, when you get employed, you pay personal taxes. But the point I was making is that one of the taxes that you actually feel when you pay, because when you pay personal taxes, is deducted before your salary is given to you, right? The employer holds that, what they call it, withholding tax. They withhold it and then they give it to you until you know your gross salary. You might not even know why your taxes are, and nobody pays much of attention to it except in systems like here where everything is laid out. But for property taxes, they will bill you, they deliver it to you, you take it out of your pocket, you pay. And when you pay and you don't get water in your home, you don't get services in your local community, you will run after that government.
Right.
So if you put more people in the mine, they have money to buy property. So the property tax you're talking about, that returns to the government. If you got more employees, you sustain the mine a longer time. Those people buy property out of the mine, they own their own real estate. And so the taxes you're looking for will come as you sustain longer mine progression. Thank you.
Well, this has been a riveting discussion. We're glad you gentlemen could join us. We've come to it's 5:30 now. We've come to the end of the show. Any last minute comments, Gabriel? Anybody?
Dr. Molova, any comment, last comment, or?
Yeah, this is good. Sorry, I had a long day, so I came late. But it was interesting, and whenever I can contribute to something that will benefit the Liberian people, I'm willing to come. So I thank you very much for this.
Thank you very much for joining us. Tom?
It was great to join you all. I mean, like I said, sometimes the topics you guys discuss is very sweet. So I saw it and just asked, can I join? And I mean, you guys were gracious enough to share the link with me. So I was very glad to join today so that we could talk about some of these things, because I think we should continue to talk about this moving forward. And the internet have made it such that the contributions that we make here, they're actually heard back home. And if you have a government that is going to be listening, they will actually listen. And one of the things I would say is that we've gone through this election. We hope by 2029, the dual citizenship law will allow the diaspora citizens to vote, and that way they become a voting bloc. And you will not just think that you've got the people in Nikuta and Busekwala to deal with, and you will just fool them to go and vote for you. So I think our democracy is gradually improving, and there are many ways that we can actually be able to contribute towards the development of the country. So thank you all for having me today.
Yeah, it was great having both of you, and I think this was probably one of the most popular or most interactive discussion we've had so far this year, and hopefully what we want to do, have another continue this discussion, maybe a part 2 on next Saturday, but really go in detail and flush out some of these ideas that we were talking about here. So hopefully you guys will be able to join us next Saturday to talk about these things. This is why we kind of pivoted away from having this kind of discussion during the whole campaign season, because but on Focus on Liberia, on the marketplace specifically, these are the things we talk about, is everything business, finance, and economics, and so I'm glad you guys are able to jump, and hopefully you're able to join next week as well. So as far as my parting comment, I think this is my second year on this show talking about the same thing. You get excited when you see a new administration come in, but there are a lot of opportunities that this government has. Hopefully they don't, I think some of you guys mentioned, they don't get too caught up in the celebration and the excitement and forget to really vet the key people and put them in position to really effect change. For me, I believe, we've been doing what I call, from one checkbook administrator to another checkbook administrator, meaning that, hey, I used to manage this money, I just come and pass it to you, you manage this as well. But in terms of really affecting transformative change in the country that is felt, that put us on a trajectory that if I'm the president, if I leave, and Dr. Molova what's your name, Kenan take over, he can take off from there, from where I left up, and bring it to another level. We haven't had that, and we had that opportunity during early time. We didn't amount to that. Hopefully, this administration is able to do that. And as you guys always know, we were going to be here monitoring them, from the business side, the economic side, and the finance side of thing, to be able to talk about some of the issues. So it was a great having you guys. And so I will yield on that. Jimmy.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to waste any more time. I'm just going to say the last comment here by Helen. She's asking, can she ask the panelists a question? Do you think we Liberians are lazy when it comes to agriculture? And do you think the new government should do more for the citizens to grow their own food? I think we touched on this, and I'm
You
for
guys
one
can
would
answer
never.
that.
Huh?
I said you guys can answer that.
Yeah, I would never see Liberian. Everything as this man who's sitting down here, we in Cedar together. We started LU engineering college together. It's all a matter of discipline. You can be the smartest person. You can be the strongest person, but if you don't have discipline, you will not be able to channel your skills, your abilities in the right direction. So, Helen, it all depends on our discipline, and that is what we need to fight for: discipline. But we got the talent, we get the ability, but we
And
need the
quickly,
discipline.
Helen, Liberia, Lofa County was known as the bread basket. So the people are not lazy; they just need the right opportunity. And luckily for us, the man who ran LCADP is now president of Liberia.
That's the shoe to fill. Yeah.
Yeah. So he should be the one now to actually implement the dreams of the people because he believed in agriculture. That's why LCADP, Nimba County, DP, all those counties were there when he was there. And so, yes, they are ready and they are not lazy because they fed us when we were growing up in our rural hometowns. Our people did subsistence farming and they fed us, and Lofa County became the bread basket of Liberia. So they are ready if you give them the chance. Thank you.
Connor.
All right.
Yeah, just one final point before Larry left. He was saying when everything settles down, President-elect JMB should actually come to the diaspora. I think that is something that the Unity Party has to take seriously because I can say that much. I don't know the percentage, but the resources that were generated from here that went into JMB campaign, he has to owe that to the diaspora. I mean, you listen people calling and giving $20, $25, and not only once, twice, three, four times. People just wanted that country to be stable so that when they retire from here, they can go back home. When they get little money from here, they can invest it back home. So I think they will have to take the diaspora very seriously. Not only the assets that are there in terms of human capital, but also the resources that are there. And I even made a comment on that if the Liberians in the diaspora are able to send this kind of money back home just for elections, and there is confidence in the government, this issue of diaspora bonds, the government can float these bonds and people in the diaspora can buy it. It can be a source of raising money. So I think they shouldn't forget about the diaspora. He should make these visitations, and not only to the US, Australia, Europe, to really just galvanize the support of all Liberians so that we can support development efforts back home. Over
Yeah,
for me.
I agree on that.
All right. Take us home, Gabriel.
Well, I know you still want us to continue talking, but I think that brings us to the end of this conversation. And thank you for your comments, your perspectives, and your opinion. And hopefully, you're able to join us next Saturday. What we want to do, as I said, we want to do a part 2 of this discussion because I believe we even had some people that wanted to call in, but as we normally do, you have your little show. You talk about things that are not interesting to Liberian people, so we don't have a number set up. Nobody pay attention to it. Nobody want to talk about numbers and economics or business or finance. Y'all won't go into politics side. So we just come here and talk about what we want to talk about. But we are going to have a second part of this discussion on next Saturday at 3 o'clock. So again, please do come. Hopefully, I think I'll work with the CEO to set up the the phone number for us so we can have a phone line open. But until then, as we said, we're all hopeful for the new administration, and we hope that they can do what they need to do to, the excitement that the Liberian people are feeling. Under that excitement, there's expectation. So don't be fooled. Don't fool yourself. Under that excitement, there's expectation, and they're going to hold your feet to the fire. And if you don't do what you need to do, 20 by the middle of this term, you're going to be hearing it from there, and by 2029, you'll be you'll be hearing another song. So please do your job.
Sorry for coming back. Sorry for coming back. There's one thing. When we look at Amarakone account for all the votes, my point is the same way the UP accounted for the votes, they should account for the people money that way. Let's know how much.
That's a good point, actually.
Yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, as we normally say, whether you agree with us or you don't agree with us, there's one thing that is true. It's the fact that we're all Liberians, and that will always remain the same. Unless, even if you go to another planet, we'll follow you there. See you next Saturday. Ciao. If I can close this show.
We are Liberians.